This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/Karsten. Hey lads, welcome back to What I Watched This Month, June edition. I started this month with a Monkey Mondays movie called Max My Love, and you better not skip forward because this is a ridiculous movie you need to hear about. This is a film about a woman who is caught having an affair with a monkey and what happens when he comes into the family. It's an absurd Buñuelian-type satire on class and marriage that, as it went on, started to really grow on me. I did worry that its undeniably ridiculous premise would grow stale, but if anything, it only allowed for the film's commentary on male fragility to really shine. I wouldn't say it's a funny movie, it's actually quite disturbing. The overblown bright cinematography makes the whole thing feel kind of nauseating, actually, which is all to say I think it would have actually benefited from leaning into the silliness a bit more. Its bleak approach feels almost too off-putting at times, but it's a very unique experience that is worth watching maybe if you have nothing else to watch. Then I rewatched Godzilla Minus One, and goddamn did this hit a lot harder on a rewatch. It really is quite a grounded film, at least for a Godzilla film, and watching it at home without the distractions of 4DX, the worst thing ever invented, really helped me get into the character dynamics a bit better. And that said, I was very moved by it, especially the found family aspects. And I have to say, it is amazing that this dodges leaning too into melodrama. It may be praised and pitched as the quote-unquote sad Godzilla movie, but the Godzilla action bits are just as thrilling and well executed. It looks leagues better than any Godzilla film I've seen in recent years. I do still need to see Shin Godzilla. I feel like I should say that. But yeah, really glad I gave this one another spin. It's a good one. Then I watched Purple Noon. After loving The Talented Mr. Ripley and Ripley on Netflix, I felt like I had to get around to this sooner rather than later. And damn, I'm so glad it was so different. Despite being the third time I've watched this story in the span of 2 months, I was still riveted by this. I genuinely think Alain Delon as Tom Ripley might be the hottest anyone has ever looked in a movie. I'm completely serious. He looks comically handsome in this movie, which is to say I think his performance is missing something. I don't know what it is, but he needs something else to pull off the character. He brought his signature cold acting style, but it didn't pull me in all that much, at least not as much as Andrew Scott or Matt Damon did. What I did think this thrived at was the straightforward investigative elements near the back half, and the ending specifically was probably my favorite ending of all the Ripley films that I've seen. If nothing else, it's worth watching for just how beautiful the locations and the actors look. Then I rewatched Arrival. Been a while since I've seen this, which is crazy considering I've always thought it to be one of my favorite Denis Villeneuve movies. I still think that's the case. The cinematography is breathtaking. The score makes me want to cry after just like a few seconds. I'll say it, probably my favorite Amy Adams performance. Can we please get her in something good again? What I will say is that now that he's made so many incredible movies, I think I'm allowed to nitpick a little bit and say that Denis does often fall short because of just how humorless his stuff has been for a long time. This being a prime example. I think about a Luca Guadagnino quote that says something like, "I don't trust humorless filmmakers because that's not what life is like." I think Denis has a deep understanding of what it means to be a person, but his films are held back by their complete lack of humor or personality. It's funny, the one time he does infuse a little bit of humor in Dune Part 2, it coincidentally grows into the biggest meme from the film. All of this to say, Arrival tries with Jeremy Renner's character, but it is the most 2016 comic relief ever. He literally drops the classic, "well, that just happened" line. It's pretty painful. I think the fact that this is the only thing I can really complain about with the film says all you need to know about how great it actually is. I just think a sense of humor is the final piece to making Denis films total masterpieces. Just had to get that off my chest. Then I watched Renfair. This is a doc series about a Texas Renfair, and it is a batshit insane roller coaster to watch unfold. Technically speaking, it's absolutely stunning, which comes as no surprise, seeing as though it's made by Lance Oppenheim. It's both a treat to watch and listen to. The sound design is comprised of all these whistles and whooshes. It's a delirious but captivating experience. The subjects, like all of his subjects, are bizarre, but captured with a sense of empathy. There are moments in here, like a character just listening to Shrek the Musical in his car, that nearly brought me to tears. Every time I watch one of Oppenheim's projects, I'm mostly shocked that what I'm watching is a documentary and not something scripted, and this especially, being essentially a King Lear adaptation, is pretty mind-blowing to watch unfold. Probably my strongest rec of the month. Give it a watch and have fun. Then I rewatched Speed Racer for Monkey Mondays. This movie, similar to another movie on this list that I'll talk about in a second, is so stuffed with color and visual eye candy that it's almost almost exhausting to watch. But that's not a bad thing. If there's any film we'll look back on as the poster child for that era of filmmaking, when the use of new technology and green screen was just abused and pushed to its limits, I think Speed Racer is the best example of what came out of that era. It pushes the technology so far out of what is normally considered acceptable that its artificiality takes over and becomes beautiful in itself. Like, even suburbia is computer generated here, the normal, non-futuristic stuff. Everything is fake, and it's kind of breathtaking when done to this extent. Point is, it deserves a lot more love. Then I rewatched Inside Out. I'd always thought of this as a ridiculously overrated film, mostly because it came at a time in my life where I was somewhat checked out of film, and specifically Pixar. But revisiting it now, I really came around to just how special it is. It truly is a miracle that it comes out as clean and as emotionally impactful as it does, considering how close it is to coming off like a shitty educational video they show you in school. I do like my Pixar a bit subtler in its messaging, but that's not to say this doesn't work on me. It's damn near impossible for me not to cry just a little bit at this movie. Then I watched Inside Out 2. Obviously not as good as the first film, never was gonna be, but still good. Everybody's commenting on my review for this as if I fucking hated it, when in fact I felt I was mostly positive about this thing. It goes down the exact route you expect it to go down for a film about a middle schooler experiencing these emotions for the first time, but it does it in a really charming and unexpected way. I love it when Pixar surprises me, and a lot of this was pretty surprising. It's too damn fast. Wish they let it play out a bit more, but still a good time. Glad it's a hit. And I rewatched The Fall Guy. Not a whole lot to say about this on a rewatch. I watched it passively at home with my parents while I worked on a puzzle, which is how I always envisioned a movie like this being consumed. It's silly popcorn fun that is endlessly rewatchable. Tons of good bits in here. I will say it does take a while for this to get off the ground, and even longer for it to wrap up. This should be a 100-minute situation, but you know what? When it comes to comedies, we'll take what we can get. Then I watched Project Nim, obviously for Monkey Mondays. And I have not been able to stop telling my friends about this movie. What an insane documentary. It's about an experiment gone wrong. A scientist sees what happens if a chimp is raised in the same way as a child, and it goes down some shocking and mostly disturbing paths that I found fascinating. Stylistically, it is a pretty standard talking heads documentary. Nothing to really write home about there, but I did find what the film was trying to say weirdly relevant. The idea that just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do it. Shout out Monkey Mondays, because I don't think I ever would have seen this if not for this challenge. Then I watched Rome Open City. This is my first Roberto Rossellini film, and I enjoyed it. For being a film about war that even has a sense of suffocation and paranoia lurking beneath every scene, the film is surprisingly funny. All of these characters are so unique and well developed. Yes, the surroundings are devastating, but the smaller moments here and there are so human and heartwarming. I just brought up that Guadagnino point about humor, and I think this is a film that really highlights why that point matters. It isn't funny out of discomfort or out of trying to cover up how tragic things are. It's funny because sometimes there's no other way to be. That's just how life is. It's a fantastic use of humor because by tapping into that side of humanity, the violence and tragedy in the film is actually more visceral. It is a wonderfully unique take on a war film that takes its subject matter deathly serious, while at the same time infusing tons of humanity. I cannot wait to watch more of this man's work. Then I watched Simon of the Desert. Haven't seen a Buñuel movie in years, and this reminded me just how incredible he is. It's not his most dense or emotionally impactful film. He really gets in and out of this one in just 40-something minutes, which is why I don't have a ton to say about it, to be honest. But that's not to say it isn't a good time. What a great example of why he's one of the best surrealists to ever do it. Killer ending, by the way. Then I watched Cheaper by the Dozen. Threw this one on while I was building a Lego, which is to say I was only half watching this, really. But at the same time, that feels like the perfect way to consume this, similar to The Fall Guy. As heartwarming as this is, I really don't get too much out of it these days. A comfort watch, sure, but it's frustrating to see someone as funny as Steve Martin in such a sappy movie. Why is Ashton Kutcher given more comedic material here than Steve? It makes no sense. But then I rewatched Cheaper by the Dozen too, because fuck it. And I was absolutely shocked to see just how many people disliked this on Letterboxd after I finished it, because I really enjoyed it. I think this has all the sappy comfort watch appeals of the first, but it actually has jokes. I mean, anytime there's a scene with Steve Martin and Eugene Levy together, it's gold. It's so good. The ending works really well. I love that they cap off this series with a grandchild. I think that's really sweet. It just worked on me. I enjoyed it way more than the first. It deserves more love. Then I rewatched Edward Scissorhands, also a classic from my childhood. This one kind of blew me away on a rewatch. Dare I say, the best Tim Burton movie? Production design on this is still unlike anything out there. Talk about timeless. I think it's the most Tim Burton's weird sense of humor has ever worked on me. Usually I feel like I'm not really in on whatever weird joke he's trying to tell, but this one is really quite funny. I think the titular Edward Scissorhands character is tragic and really sad in a way that moved me way more than I thought it would. This really bummed me out as a child, and it still bums me out as an adult. The Vincent Price casting is just amazing. Just a good movie. Damn near perfect movie, to be honest. Glad this one held up. Then I watched The Story of the Monkey King for Monkey Mondays. This is a charming little animated short that uses 2D cutouts that I have very little to say about. It's a nice bedtime story, but it does feel unfinished. Then I watched Hundreds of Beavers. I've been recommended this one hundreds of times, and I can see why. I've made a big deal over how important silly cinema is, especially nowadays, and this is the silliest cinema we've had in a very long time. Not only is it a beautiful ode to cartoons and the silent cinema of the 1920s, but it also elevates those styles to such a degree that you could basically call this an epic. There are, I kid you not, like 15 bits per minute in this thing. It's so overwhelming and stuffed with gags. I honestly find it a bit exhausting, similar to Speed Racer, especially for being an hour and 40 minutes. This does not feel like an hour and 40 minute movie. I also think that while the fact that it feels like a video game is kind of charming, it does give the film an awkward pace at the midpoint that didn't really work for me. I mean this as a compliment. I think this is the closest YouTube and film have ever merged together. This does feel like the best YouTube video I've ever seen. That feels incredibly dismissive, but I promise it's a compliment. It feels like a new style that really works in film for the first time. It's hard not to appreciate just how well crafted this thing is. It's somehow both a delightful ode to the past and a look into the future. Highly recommend. Then I watched The Secret of Kells. I was always told this was the weakest of Cartoon Saloon's filmography, and maybe that's so if we're talking about the animation, but I was mostly charmed by its story. This is some rich Irish folklore with a hypnotic Celtic score, clocking in at just an hour and 15 minutes. I mean, how could you not enjoy this? Yeah, it's a little watered down next to something like Song of the Sea or especially Wolfwalkers, but I'm not sure I would want something like this to be anything more than what it is. Then I watched The Beast, and holy hell, yes. It has been a while since a new release has really floored me and challenged me in the way The Beast did. I'm talking similar to Climax, First Reformed, and most recently Tar, films that rewired my brain and got me more excited about cinema than I already was. A film that showed me something I had never really seen before, in a way that I had never really seen before. Which is funny to say, as I do think this film pulls a lot from David Lynch, but not ever in an annoying way. In fact, this is one of the only Lynchian films that doesn't seem like a cheap parody. This thing is properly disturbing and surreal. But again, to compare this to anything feels like a lost cause, as it really is its own beast. I love a film that almost immediately hooks me in, even if I'm not entirely sure what's going on. That's especially the case with this. I was put in a spell almost immediately, thanks mostly to what is easily the best Léa Seydoux performance I've seen from her so far. Talk about a heavy performance. And I was endlessly entertained by just how much this experiments, and with how many of these experiments actually land. This is a film unafraid to go for it. Again, a true rarity these days. I've only just scratched the surface, but I'll save more thoughts for my inevitable rewatch. Really loved this movie. I also started The Sopranos. I'm only a few episodes deep, so it's a bit early for me to call it a masterpiece, but I am really enjoying it. I'm glad it's way more than just big tough guy goes to therapy. It's unsurprisingly very dense and complex. If you can't tell, I need to watch more of it before I can say anything of any substance, but stay tuned. I also caught up on all of The Bear in the span of like 5 days, so that's maybe why there aren't as many movies on this list as there usually are. I have many thoughts on this show, many mixed feelings on it, most of which I want to save for a standalone video if anyone cares, but for now I'll say I think the first season is a perfectly serviceable piece of TV that did just enough. Season 2 was when it really started to fly and found its own voice, and Season 3 is a bit of a mixed bag. It's a lot better than people are giving it credit for, I'll say, even if it's undeniably not as strong as the others. I don't know, I have way more thoughts on this on the way, but good show. I'm also going to cheat for the first time ever and say I also watched A Quiet Place Day 1. Technically watched this in July, but I want to talk about it while it's still relevant. And I also just need to rant about it, because guys, What the hell is this? What is the point of this? Who is this for? What is this movie even about? Truly, I can't tell you the last time I was this bored by a new release. It's maybe only slightly more interesting than that last Exorcist movie. The craft is there. I think literally everyone involved in it is uniquely talented and does the best they can. It's competently made, for sure, but holy shit is this dull. Just adding absolutely nothing to the horror genre, doing nothing for apocalypse movies, doing nothing with grief, nothing interesting with sound, nothing interesting with world building, no tension, had about as much depth as a sappy Super Bowl commercial if I'm being honest. Some cool cat stuff, that's the most I can give this, but I thought this was mostly a muddy snooze fest. Everyone involved deserves better. And hey, that's what I watched this month. What'd you watch? Please let me know. Thanks for watching. Go watch these films and form your own opinion, and if you're looking for something to watch next month, you should check out this week's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. Something I love about Mubi is the kinds of films that they have on there. Films I never would have even heard of if not for the site, like Gasoline Rainbow, which I'm really looking forward to checking out next month. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Karsten. That's mubi.com/Karsten for a whole month of great cinema for free. Plus, if you're a student, you can check out Mubi's exclusive offer just for students anywhere in the world. To become a student member on Mubi, all you'll need is your school email address and to be currently enrolled in university or higher education. As a student member, you have special access to an exclusive discounted plan, a student-only curated film selection, events, contests, and prizes. For more information, visit the link in my description.